Okay, so this one is a little bit different from my typical video. I am actually going to tell you a story today. So, I grew up in West Virginia, and there really wasn't very many used gaming stores around in the late 90s and early 2000s. In fact, I don't think I stepped into anything other than, there was no, GameStop, when it came around, the first time I ever stepped foot in a GameStop was in 2008, so it took that long. I mean, yeah, we had EB Games and all that, but I never really went to one. The main reason why, most of them were located in malls, and when I was growing up, my parents regarded malls as being extremely dangerous. The only mall that I ever really went to was a mall called the Kanawha Mall, and it doesn't exist as an indoor mall anymore. It's now a strip mall. I don't even know if it's called the Kanawha Mall anymore, but that was the only mall that my parents ever took me to when I was a kid, and we went there frequently. Now, there was another one called the Town Center Mall, and it was regarded as being in a very dangerous place to be at certain times of the day because of crime in the area. But in the Kanawha Mall, there were really no used gaming stores. By the early 2000s, the mall was on decline. It was in decline. The stores were slowly going out of business one by one. It actually started with the food court. Strangely, one by one, all the restaurants in the food court started closing. By 2002, there were only maybe 4 out of the previous 8. I should say out of 10, actually. 4 of the previous 10 that were still in business at the food court. One of them was a place that I frequented. It was a pizza place. And my dad was good friends with the guy who ran it. But it started with the food court, and then it started with the businesses. What happened was there was a shopping center about roughly 5 miles away, maybe less than that was built. A strip mall with, it had a Kohl's and a Books A Million and a Target. And, here's one you haven't heard in a long time. Gateway Country. Gateway Country was a store that was ran by Gateway Computers. So they were one of the, I think they went out of business around 2004, I believe, in my area. I only wandered in there probably twice. But anyway, at that mall there was no gaming stores other than you had Hills in the late 90s, which then shut down for a brief period and became Ames Department Store. And then you had KB Toys, and then later on you had FYE, which FYE, I believe, was there for about probably roughly 7 years before the mall decided to close the indoor side down and become a strip mall. And then, of course, there was an arcade which closed in 2003. And after the arcade, it became a collectible shop. Now, the collectible shop didn't sell anything in terms of video games, but they did sell toys, Power Rangers, and everything. And, all of that. And they had some video game related stuff like Mario figures, and I remember specifically they had some Primal Rage action figures like the dinosaurs and the ape and all that. I mostly went there to buy Pokemon cards. They would sell individual Pokemon cards for 30 cents a piece, 30 cents to $1 a piece, depending on popularity, and I would buy them there. For several years, I even joined a league there. But the first time I ever went there, I was looking at a Power Ranger figure, and I guess the guy behind the counter, I don't know if he was the owner or if he was one of the employees, but he literally cussed me out for just looking at the Power Ranger. I told my dad. My dad went nuts. And the guy apparently, the next time we came, my dad didn't even want to go back. He said, "Oh, you don't want to deal with a-holes like that, you know." So basically what happened was, next time we come back, the guy isn't there, and we never did see that guy again. I'm guessing he was an employee, so he probably got fired. But, yeah, that mall was the only place that we really went to, and I always wanted to find used games, because the only ones that I was ever finding when I went anywhere was new games, and I would always get my new games mostly from KB Toys. They had like really good discounts on some of their games, but it was more or less fate when I discovered that pawn shops sold used video games. There was a pawn shop. They haven't existed for years, by the way. And I'll tell you what happens at the end of the story. Or what happened to them. Anyway, there was this pawn shop. They existed in this really gritty part of town. And they were well organized. We actually went in there because I think it was probably October 2002. It was the first time we ever stepped foot in there. My dad went there to look for a weed eater. And that's when I spotted for the first time that they had an entire case, a row, probably about 6 cases long, full of PS1 and Nintendo 64 games, and a few PS2 and GameCube games at that point. Very little PS2 and GameCube. No Xbox. But that was when I discovered, hey, here's some used games. And I remember the first one I ever bought from them, I believe, was the Lost World Jurassic Park. I paid like $7.99 for it. That was their price for all their games, $7.99. And then later on, when they were like, the prices later dropped over a period of time. But between 2002 and 2004, I would go there frequently. And I remember getting The Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time, Super Smash Bros., Pokemon Stadium 2, $7.99 a pop. And this was like circa 2002, 2003. And it was just, it amazed me. I didn't know such a place existed. Like, it was magical. And then I'd go in there and buy VHS tapes. Like in 2002, their VHS tapes were like $2.99 a piece, which that was still relatively cheap for used ones, because at that point in time, people were still using VCRs. I even remember we bought a VCR from there, used, for like, I think it was like $49.99 in 2003. And it was like a 2-year-old VCR at that time. But that was a place that I frequented for about a 2-year period, roughly, when I was a kid. Maybe less than 2 years. Well, anyway, fast forward to 2004, and we went to visit them, and suddenly they were gone. The pawn shop was completely gone, and there was a sign on the door that said, "Tenant kicked us out. Moved across town. Here is our new address," and it had the address. So then we went there, and it's this cramped little hole in the wall, and as soon as you go in, like, it was not organized at all. I don't know what happened. It looked like the place was completely trashed. There was like people sitting around. Some of them were like really shady looking people. They're like, half their teeth were missing, and it looked like they had completely gone under new ownership. But nevertheless, I did end up buying a few Nintendo 64 games from there. I remember I got Rugrats in Paris for like $3.99, and Hey You Pikachu $3.99 with the microphone. But what happened was, about 2 months after they opened there, they suddenly just disappeared overnight. And what happened was, they went out of business. I guess they couldn't support the loans or anything. So what they done was, everybody who pawned something to them, they stole it and then fled the state and sold the stuff at flea markets that people had on pawn, as well as their existing inventory they had left. Now, I don't know if they ever did catch these people. I think they might have caught one or two of them, but it was just a really weird thing. Like, I was 11 years old at the time that this happened. And it's been like almost, let's see, how long ago has that been? It's been about 16 years ago, I believe. But my dad was like explaining to me, he said, "Son, they ripped off a bunch of people and fled the state." And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I need to find some 64 games. So we looked around for a few weeks, and we ended up, I think we just pulled it out of the phone book or something. There was a pawn shop, and it, like, back then, it like had really cheap prices. Like, you could walk in there and get any 64 title for like $4.99 a piece, any of them. And eventually what happened was, I went there up until probably like 2010, 2011. Maybe 2012. And what ended up happening is, over time, they started going, I guess they had somebody new they put in charge, and this guy, he was there for a long time. He ended up doing like eBay prices. Like, everything was priced at what it would sell for at the most maximum price on eBay. And I just, after like 4 or 5 visits after that, I just stopped going altogether. I think I stopped buying like after this guy took over, and that was that. That was the end of my pawn shop searching. There was actually some other pawn shops that had jumped up after this one went out of business, and I ended up going to them for like PS2 games. And then I remember I bought like a brand new Wii from this one pawn shop in like 2010 for like $79, just because they had like an overstock of them, where so many people, I guess, had either sold them to them or pawned them, and they were like paying really cheap for them, like new old stock, like, and not really new old stock, but just new ones at that point that never been taken out of the package. They were giving people like $40 for them, and then turning them around and selling them for $79 plus tax. But yeah, that one pawn shop started doing like eBay prices. I'm like, nope, I'm gonna get out of collecting 64 stuff. And over time, I sold some of my N64 collection. I held on to the rare and the popular ones, but I got rid of like almost all of my common stuff, except with the exception of a few. But around 2012, actually it was before that, around the late 2010s, I started selling in flea markets, and I had my own little shop going on. Originally, when I started selling in flea markets, I was inspired by the pawn shops of the day, like, you know, selling CRT TVs and VCRs, which I'm going to be 100% honest with you. Up until like 2015, CRT TVs in my area sold extremely well. Then after 2015, they just suddenly dropped off the face of the earth, and you had a very niche market for them. Mostly the retro gamers who wanted them. But originally I started out selling like collectible toys and CRT TVs, and then VCRs, which I taught myself using YouTube in the late 2000s, early 2010s, on how to fix and restore VCRs and DVD players. And I would buy them like at Goodwill or yard sales or whatever, and then I would, like, if they needed cleaning, I would clean them. If not, I'd just put them out there and sell them for like $25 a piece. And that's how I got my start. And then eventually I got into computers, and I started with desktops. I was selling desktops with Linux on them, like $100 a pop, with a monitor and keyboard and mouse, like all day long. And that was my business for like at least 3 years. And I was selling laptops too. And then that market died off when the smartphone and the tablet kind of took over by 2013, 2014. And then eventually I got into selling retro games and consoles. And that's the only market that's remained consistent since the late 2000s for whatever reason. It's just everybody... it's something that everybody still needs and wants. And I basically started a store in the flea market and then worked my way up slowly to a retail store. And I knew quite a few people who tried to imitate what I did. They saw that I was successful. There's a saying, find someone successful and follow them, or follow what they're doing. And they ended up not lasting very long, going out of business. I remember one in particular. There was a store that they started out selling toys, and then they saw what I was doing and started selling retro video games. And they got successful for a while. They had all this popularity, all these people. Their Achilles heel was they bought like crazy. They took out hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans to start a retail store. And within 2 years, they went out of business and were bankrupt and lost everything, which is pretty sad. But what happened was they invested too heavily into the retro market, and there was like a lull of nobody buying retro stuff between 2015 and 2016, and even into 2017. And they invested heavily, and it cost them everything. Like, they started out where, they basically copied me, more or less, and it didn't work for them. They just didn't have they just weren't doing something right. But yeah, I've been doing this for a while now, and I feel like I've been successful, and I hope I continue to be. Of course, I'll save that for another story. If you'd like to hear the rest of that story, how I started my business, like complete details, not just what I told you in this video, but if you want to hear complete details of how I started, like my origins, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll tell you the complete story up to the current. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell if you want notifications of when we release more awesome videos. And until next time, I will see ya.